Warm greetings everyone. I am Dr. Pawandeep Kaur from Khalsa College of Law, Amritsar. The topic of our today's discussion is the Constituent Assembly, its composition and contribution. First of all, welcome all to today's talk. Dear learners, in the first part of this module, we will discuss the timeline and overview of the Constituent Assembly, and in the second part, we will discuss composition and contribution of the Constituent Assembly. Dear friends, the present module will make you acquainted with formation of the Constituent Assembly of India, composition of the Constituent Assembly of India, critical analysis and composition of the Constituent Assembly, working of the Constituent Assembly, committees of Constituent Assembly, functions of the Constituent Assembly and unification of India. So, let us start with introductory part of this module. The Constitution is a state's highest law or ground norm. According to Kelson, in every country there is a hierarchy of legal norms headed by what he calls the ground norm. If a legal norm in a higher layer of this hierarchy conflicts with the legal norm in a lower layer of the former will prevail. In India, the ground norm is the Indian Constitution. In a democracy, the populace shapes the Constitution, yet they do not participate in its creation. The Constitution was drafted by a group made up of its elective representatives. As a result, the Constituent Assembly is a group of elected officials who drafted the nation's constitution. The framing of a constitution by the Constituent Assembly is undoubtedly a significant event in the constitutional history of India. The Constitution of India was framed by a Constituent Assembly, a representative body of the people of India, working for about 3 years since December 9, 1946 and adopted by it on November 26, 1949. The idea of a Constituent Assembly was first proposed in the year of 1934 by M.N. Roy. Indian National Congress demanded it in 1935 to frame the Indian Constitution. However, the actual Constituent Assembly was formed in 1946 based on the Cabinet Mission Plan. The Indian Constitution was drafted by Constituent Assembly. It served as a representative body for the Indian populace. The Constituent Assembly finally approved the 395 articles and 8 schedules that made up the Indian Constitution on 26 November 1949. The Constituent Assembly took a total of 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to draft the Constitution of India. The Constituent Assembly of India was established to draft a constitution for the country. The Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946 established the Constituent Assembly of India. Members of the Constituent Assembly came from all communities and divisions of the Indian population. It had 385 members, 292 of whom were chosen by members of the province legislative assemblies and 93 of whom were nominated by the princely states. The 4 chief commissioners provinces of Delhi, Ajmer, Marwar, Kurg and British Balochistan each had 1 delegate. The idea of a Constituent Assembly germinated in the social contract tradition that the constitution of a sovereign democratic nation would be framed by the citizens themselves is a powerful democratic assertion. A Constituent Assembly is a body extraordinary. It is constituted with the specific purpose of drawing up a constitution and dissolve on the completion of its task. Also known as Constitutional Convention or a Constitutional Assembly, it frames a constitution through internally imposed actions. The formation of a Constituent Assembly is an acknowledgement of sovereignty as well as the right to self-determination of a people. Across the world, major democratic upheavals like the French Revolution, Russian Revolution and American Revolution were followed by the framing of the Constitution, written by the citizens, representatives of the respective countries in an elected Constituent Assembly. Sir Ivor Jennings has noted 3 situations in which Constituent Assembly comes into being. First one, where there is a great social revolution. Second, where a nation throws off its foreign yoke. Or third one is, when a nation is created by a fusion of smaller political units. In this scheme of Sir Jennings, the Indian Constituent Assembly falls into the second category. Dear friends, after introductory part of this module, now I would like to put light upon the formation of the Constituent Assembly of India. The Constituent Assembly of India was originally formed to frame the Constitution of India. The Provincial Assembly was the one who elected this committee. M.N. Rao, a pioneer of the communist movement in India, was the first person who proposed the idea of the Constituent Assembly in 1934. This idea was later proposed by the Indian National Congress in 1935. There was a session held by the Indian National Congress presided by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in April 1935 at Lucknow. During this session, members of Congress raised an official demand for the Constituent Assembly. However, this demand was rejected. In 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru made an impactful statement regarding the Constitution and Assembly. The Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference by a Constituent Assembly elected based on adult franchise. Later on, Chakravarti Rajagopalacharya, who was an independent activist and at the same time an Indian statesman, writer and lawyer, raised his voice for the making of the Constituent Assembly of India on 15th November 1939. The British accepted the demand for the Constituent Assembly through their August offer on 1940. The elections for the Assembly were held for the first time under the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946. In 1946, Constituent Assembly was established. The Cabinet Mission Plan created the notion of framing the Constituent Assembly to draft the Indian Constitution. The Constituent Assembly was made up of elected delegates from several provinces who were all well-known figures in their respective disciplines. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Sarojini Naidu, Dr. Rajinder Prasad, Nehru were among the members. To design the country's constitution, the Constituent Assembly of India had multiple sessions, discussions and debates, and enacted several draft resolutions. Our constitution went into effect on January 26, 1950. Dear learners, the next part of this module is the composition of the Constituent Assembly of India. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was 389. Of these, 296 seats were allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely states. Out of 296 seats allotted to British India, 292 members were chosen from the 11 governors provinces and 4 from the 4 chief commissioners provinces, 1 from each. Seats were to be distributed proportionally to the population of each province and princely states, or group of states in the event of tiny states. 1 seat was supposed to be allocated for every million people. By their number, seats given to each British province were bifurcated among the 3 main communities: Muslims, Sikhs and General. Members of each community were to elect their representatives in the Provincial Legislative Assembly, and voting was done using the proportional representation method with the single transferable vote. The princely states representatives were chosen by the princely states head. As a result, the Constituent Assembly was to be a body that was to be partially elected and partly appointed. Furthermore, The members were to be elected indirectly by provincial assembly members who were elected on a limited franchise. In July-August 1946, elections to the Constituent Assembly for 296 seats apportioned to the British Indian provinces were held. The Indian National Congress gained 208 seats, Muslim League 73 seats, and remaining 15 seats went to the tiny group and independents. The 93 seats given to the princely states, however, were not filled because they chose to boycott the Constituent Assembly. Dear learners, as nothing is flawless in this world, the critics have criticized the Constituent Assembly on various grounds, and these grounds are as follow. The first one is not a representative body. Constituent Assembly was not a representative body according to the opponents because its members were not directly elected by the people of India using the universal adult franchise system. Further, not a sovereign entity. Critics said that Constituent Assembly was not a sovereign body because it was established by British government suggestions. They further claimed that Assembly met with the authorization of the British government. Further, time consuming. Critics claim that the Constituent Assembly took an excessive amount of time to draft a constitution. They claimed that the framers of the American Constitution finished their work in just 4 months. Further, Congress dominated Constituent Assembly. Critics said that Congress party dominated the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly was one party assembly, is an essentially one party society, said Granville Austin, British constitutional expert. The Congress was the assembly and India was the Congress. Next one is lawyer politician domination. The Constituent Assembly was likewise dominated by attorneys and politicians according to detractors. They argued that other aspects of society were not adequately reflected. This, they believe, is the primary cause for the Constitution's volume and complication of language. Further, Hindu dominated factor. Some critics claim that the Constituent Assembly was Hindu dominated. Lord Viscount Simon referred to it as a Hindu body. Winston Churchill likewise stated that Constituent Assembly represented just one large community in India. Further, I would like to put a light upon the working of the Constituent Assembly. Dear friends, the Constituent Assembly met for the first time on 9th December 1946. This meeting, however, was boycotted by the Muslim League to assert their demand for Pakistan. As a result, there were 211 members present at the Assembly's first meeting. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha, who was the Assembly's eldest member, was appointed as a temporary president. Dr. Rajinder Prasad then became the president of the Constituent Assembly and later became the first president of India. The Assembly later elected its president and vice president. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the elected president and H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamacharya were the two vice presidents. B.N. Rao was appointed as the constitutional advisor. After the application of the Mountbatten Plan, members of the Muslim League who were a part of Indian territory participated in the meetings of the council. Members of the princely states who initially absconded from the proceedings of the council participated later. A draft constitution inclusive of all proposals and clauses was published by the Assembly in February 1948 under the guidance of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The Assembly again met in November 1948 to consider every clause of the draft constitution. The second reading of the draft constitution was completed by the 17th of October 1949 and third reading was completed by 14th of November 1949. On 26th of November, the Constitution of India received the signature of the members of the Assembly. The Assembly conducted its last session on 24 January 1950. The provisions regarding citizenship, election, provincial parliament and temporary and transitional provisional were implemented immediately from 26 November 1949, while the remaining provisions of the Constitution were enforced on 26 January 1950. A total of 11 sessions were conducted by the Constituent Assembly over 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. Dear audience, the Constituent Assembly has various committees. The Constituent Assembly established various committees to examine the various departments involving in creating the Constitution of an independent India. The Constituent Assembly had 22 committees in total. Procedural matters were handled by 10 committees. 12 committees were in charge of important issues. The drafting committee has undoubtedly had a significant impact on Indian policies as a result of its critical role in the Constitution drafting process. Indian leaders were especially interested in its successful working, and therefore it was made possible in 3 ways. First, committee were set up to report on the main issues of the principle, and in these national leaders like Nehru and Patel played an important role. Second, the Assembly's constitutional advisor brought together a great deal of data on foreign constitutions and prepared, based on the committee reports, a rough draft. Third, drafting committee under the valuable chairmanship of Dr. Ambedkar prepared the detailed draft constitution. Following is the list of committees and chairmen. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar chaired drafting committee. Rajinder Prasad chaired ad hoc committee on the national flag, rules of procedure committee, finance and staff committee, steering committee. Further, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel chaired advisory committee, minorities and tribal and excluded areas committee, provincial constitution committee. Further, G.V. Mavlankar chaired functions of the Constituent Assembly. Aladi Krishna Swami Iyer, special committee to examine the draft constitution. A.V. Thakur had presided over excluded and partially excluded areas subcommittee. J.B. Kripalani, fundamental rights and subcommittee. B.P. Sitaramaiah has chaired House committee. Gopinath Bardoi has chaired North-East Frontier Tribal Areas and Assam Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas Subcommittee. Further, H.C. Mukherjee has chaired Minorities Subcommittee. Dear students, the most important committee is the Drafting Committee. The Constitution of India is the longest in the world. It had 395 articles in 22 parts and 8 schedules at its beginning. On 29 August 1947, Drafting Committee of the Indian Constitution was appointed and had 7 members. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Chairman of the Drafting Committee, Aladi Krishna Swami Iyer as a member, N. Gopal Swami as a member, K.M. Munshi, Muhammad Sadullah, B.L. Mittal and D.P. Khaitan. They were the member of this committee. On August 13, 1947, Drafting Committee convened for the first time, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was chosen to preside as the committee's chairman. It was the most significant committee because it was tasked with drafting a new constitution for India based on the information provided by the other Constituent Assembly committees. The first draft of proposed constitution was made public by the Drafting Committee on February 21, 1948. Then for roughly 8 months, it was examined by Indian citizens. The public also suggested additional changes. The necessary adjustments were made following public feedback, and the next draft committee of the Constitution was published in October 1948. The full Indian Constitution took the Drafting Committee 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to complete its inception in 1947. Over 165 days, the Constituent Assembly met a total of 11 times. Out of these, 114 days were devoted to the drafting committee's discussions and drafts of the Constitution. Three important pillars of the Constitution to which special attention was given by the Constituent Committee were: a system of government by ministers responsible to legislature chosen by adult franchise was established at the center and in the states. Further, federal relationship between the center and units was worked out in detail. The relationship among citizens and between citizens and the state was set in a framework provided by the chapter on fundamental rights, directive principles, minority privileges and independence of the judiciary. The Government of India Act 1935 also furnished a model which, with necessary alteration, enabled the drafting committee to introduce reform for the new Constitution of India. Dear friends, further we will discuss function of the Constituent Assembly. Framing the Constitution, enacting laws and being involved in decision-making process, it adopted the national flag on 22nd July 1947. It accepted and approved India's membership of the British Commonwealth in May 1949. It elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first President of India on 24 January 1950. It adopted the national anthem on 24 January 1950. It adopted the national song on 24 January 1950. Further, objective resolution. The objective resolution was moved on December 13, 1946 by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, which provided the philosophy and guiding principles for the framing the Constitution and later took the form of preamble of Constitution of India. This resolution was unanimously adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 22nd January 1947. The resolution stated that the Constituent Assembly would firstly proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic which includes all territories, retaining as autonomous units and possesses residuary powers. All the people of India shall be granted justice, equality of status, freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association and subject to law and public morality. Adequate safeguards shall be provided for minorities, backward depressed classes, the integrity of the territories of the Republic and its sovereign rights on the land, sea and air, and thus India would contribute to promotion of world peace and the welfare of mankind. Dear learners, the most unique feature, that is unification of India. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the indomitable man who integrated 562 princely states with the Union of India and prevented the balkanization of a newly independent country, owes an incalculable debt of gratitude to the vision, tact, diplomacy and pragmatic approach of today's India. India finally gained its hard-won independence in 1947, but it came with a slew of problems, including partition, communal rights and a refugee crisis. It's easy to see why India's new government found the integration of more than 500 princely states a difficult nut to crack, given the country's crippling resources, constraints, fledgling institutions and ill-equipped colonial machinery. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, India's first Deputy Prime Minister and Home Affairs Minister, would not only handle these issues deftly and dexterously, but would go on to be known as architect of modern India. Further and finally, there was enactment and enforcement of Constitution of India. The final draft of the Constitution was introduced in the Assembly in 1948. After subsequent readings, the Constituent Assembly adopted, enacted and gave to them the Constitution on 26 November 1949. Some provisions of the Constitution came into force on the above mentioned date. However, most provisions came into force on January 26, 1950. This date is referred to in the Constitution as the date of its commencement. This day is celebrated as a Republic Day every year. This day was chosen by the Constitution makers to pay homage to the Puran Swaraj, which started on January 26, 1930. Dear friends, at the end, I would like to conclude the present module by saying that Constituent Assembly took almost 3 years, 2 years, 11 months and 18 days to be precise, to complete its historic task of drafting the Constitution for independent India. During this period, it held 11 sessions covering a total of 165 days. Of these, 114 days were spent on the consideration of the draft Constitution. As to its composition, members were chosen by indirect election by the members of the provincial legislative assemblies according to the scheme recommended by the Cabinet Mission. On 25th November 1949, at the penultimate sitting of the Constituent Assembly, which drafted independent India's Constitution, Bhim Rao Ramji Ambedkar said that we are going to enter into a life of contradiction. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. In politics, we will be recognizing the principle of one man and one vote. In our social and economic life, we shall, because of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradiction? How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. We must remove this contradiction at the earliest possible moment, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the structure of political democracy, which this assembly has so laboriously built up. So friends, this was all about today's discussion. We'll see you in the next module. Thank you very much.